This week, two topics that demand our attention. One that many consider to be of historical significance, and the other has to do with our health and how we pay for it. It's been 2 years since the beginning of the Affordable Care Act, and this is the open enrollment time of year, and many people may soon find they'll be paying higher premiums next year. So has Obamacare helped with health care? But first, activism at Mizzou. Protests certainly seem to get results. They definitely got reaction. While that story continues to develop, we'll try to step back and see it in the larger story. So stay tuned. Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. 15 to the roll. 45, 10, and put it up to the show. 10, 9, 8. So joining us to help us see that larger story of what's been going on at Mizzou, I know you've been thinking about this. This is Stephen Bradley, Director of African American Studies, St. Louis University. So, okay, so let's put it in this context, and I'll ask you a couple of questions based on a couple of things I heard and saw. When I was in Columbia for KSDK, I was there for a couple of days. Our crews have been there for a few days, and maybe that's the first thing that we could start with. We were there for just a few days. This week we arrived perhaps, and as did just about every out-of-town outlet, on about day 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 or 8 of this hunger strike that had started with one of the graduate students. But then the football team got involved. Have you ever seen anything quite like that?
Oh, in history, this has happened before. That, you know, in the 60s, there was a time when college athletes would actually protest and demonstrate on behalf of civil rights issues and that sort of thing. So it's not uncommon when you think about some of the professional athletics. Bill Russell, you think about Jim Brown, you think about Jackie Robinson and Muhammad Ali and all these kinds of people, Bobby Mitchell. These kinds of people had made these kinds of demonstrations before in one way or another. And
but so, all of those are none of those are contemporary examples. Has something reawakened, or is something changed, or what happened in that time period in between there? I'm curious, do you draw a link to the college activism we saw are still seeing at the University of Missouri and college activism of the 1960s?
Well, there is, of course, I think, a link, maybe not a causal link, but there's a historical background for it. I think what we're seeing right now is just part of the zeitgeist of the moment. I think the Ferguson effect in this particular region, the idea that you would have these demonstrations out here in the St. Louis area. You'd have the occupation of St. Louis University nearby here, and then what you saw at Mizzou is part of maybe what's going on with the larger Black Lives Matter movement, and so it's not unthinkable that something like this is happening at college campuses, and so it's just a moment of protest at this particular time.
Certainly the people involved have said that it played a factor.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, some of them were in Ferguson.
Yeah.
Something else I heard there is speaking again of maybe the relationship between those of us over 30 that can't be trusted and the activist. One of the, I think it was an education professor who we did an interview with on the campus, who said these students are to be supported of something of that nature. She said that we don't need to fear them. Did we fear activists in the 60s? Do we fear them now? Why is there a difference, or what's going on here that she would even feel like she needed to say that?
Well, I think part of what happened in the 1960s is many of the activists caught adults and authority figures off guard. They didn't think that young people would act out in these kinds of ways, and so that can be frightening when you're used to telling young people to do something and they do it. I think the same thing is happening today. So many of us had written off young people in the younger generation as narcissistic individual creatures,
which they might still be,
and they may still. Who knows? Along with the rest of us, but
right.
But these young people are thinking in terms of a collective identity, and so the idea that young people concerned students 1950 would take up this protest, and then Jonathan Butler, the graduate student, would make this hunger strike, and then the football players, the African American football players and the others would jump on with this. That's collective identity stuff, and in some ways that's inspiring and nothing to fear, but more in the way of something to guide and instruct, and I think the education professor was right, and encourage.
Of course, not everyone felt that way. We've seen a really nasty reaction online. We've had people arrested for some of the things they've said. Did that surprise you?
Not at all, not at all. When you read the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, when you read most any major news media
comment section, I think is where you're going with that.
Yeah, it's easy to tell what's going to happen, and so this social media cuts both ways. It's been able to help organize a lot of these young people who are activists, but it's also brought out some of the worst in people who are oppositional to the activists.
So what do you make of what was accomplished, or in some people's mind, not everyone would see it as an accomplishment, but it seems significant when you have a president stepping down and a chancellor demoted? It certainly seems like from the outside looking in. Are these significant developments?
Yeah, definitely. When you think that young people who aren't 30 years old yet can get people to step down and resign in this way, that's not an insignificant thing. But I'll say this: that might have been the smaller part of their campaign. That might have been the smaller part. The larger part are the other demands that they had in terms of recruitment and retention of students, black students and faculty members, getting a counselor, getting these diversity ideas into the curriculum that all students have to take. Those are, that's a tougher road to hoe, and so I think that no, it's not small that they got the president and the chancellor to step down, but the hard work is ahead of them.
Well, and speaking of that, and going back to things we heard while we were there, I mean, some of these demands were carryovers from decades ago, from the 1960s, and they were almost cut and paste into the current demands. Mm-hmm. Is there a what does that tell you?
Well, that tells you that maybe the activists of the 1960s weren't just young thugs and that sort of thing. Maybe they had their fingers on the pulse of progress, and so the fact that here we are, 50 years later almost, having to deal with the same kinds of things and the same kind of feelings of African American students at Mizzou, it's things come in a circle. I think nothing shows that more than the appointment of Mike Middleton to interim president, who was one of the founding members of the Legion of Black Collegians, and so this is how things come in a full circle.
Of course, some people had the reaction that they were concerned that this would set a bad precedent, that you could go on a hunger strike and remove the president of a four-campus system. What do you make of that reaction?
Well, I think another bad precedent is ignoring issues when they come to the fore, and so that's an important thing. I think the president had an obligation to react and pay attention to what's happening on his campus, and so I'm not sure that I would put that on Jonathan Butler, who was raising awareness about an issue, and he felt unsafe on a campus, and at a university campus, the one thing that should be guaranteed is safety. Now, comfort, I don't think that comfort should be guaranteed at all. You go to the university campus to be uncomfortable, and so I think that I wouldn't put that on Jonathan Butler. Yeah.
Stephen, thank you so much. Stephen Bradley, Director of African American Studies at St. Louis University. We appreciate it. This is a story I think we'll be following, would you agree, for some time, and perhaps other implications.
Yeah, well, you'll see it happening around the nation, I'm sure.
Very good, Stephen. Thank you so much. Okay, so a lot is going on. Also, we talked about it before. It's been 2 years since the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, was rolled out. So is our health care system better or worse?
When its rollout started with a nightmare of a website, supporters of the Affordable Care Act said history would forget the glitch and predicted more health care coverage at less of a cost. But 2 years later, when trying to measure the success of the ACA, aka Obamacare, different groups of people can see different results, depending on age, employment, earning power, etc. This much we know, according to a Gallup survey. The number of the uninsured has fallen from 18% of American adults to around 11%. Healthcare costs are still going up, but at the slowest rate of inflation in decades, according to the chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Still, according to the employee benefits firm Mercer, not only are premiums for those who get insurance through work expected to go up by about 4% in 2016, but copays are expected to rise as well, a trend employees are familiar with, paying more for less coverage. So does Obamacare at least have our health care headed in the right direction, or do we need a second opinion?
Okay, I've divided our time, so let's dive right in to talk about the healthcare situation in America. Duri Biscarin, health and science reporter for St. Louis Public Radio. Thank you for being here. Tim McBride, welcome back to the show, professor of public health, Washington University. And then also welcome back to Dr. Heidi Miller, a primary care internist and family care health centers. And Bill Hill, welcome back as well, president and CEO of Visor Benefits. So let's maybe start with that glitch that we were experiencing when the Obamacare first rolled out. Was it just a glitch? Am I using the right word? Have we forgotten that? Or could people potentially experience problems again this time of year when they're trying to enroll?
Well, the glitch lasted, if you call it a glitch, lasted a couple months or maybe 6 weeks or so, where it was pretty much non-functional. But the open enrollment period the first year was about 6 months. So people were eventually able to enroll and they got it back up running.
So we don't worry about that.
So our Director of Operations at Family Care Health Center reports that the system is actually working much better than it ever has before. So not only are our internal certified application counselors more equipped to and more experienced to help patients apply, they report that the website has worked much better. It has been much faster to enroll patients, and when there are questions, calling the national line, the pickup is much faster, and the people who are answering the questions on the phone are also more equipped and experienced. So it's smoother this year for sure.
So what about when they get the product that it may be easier to get? What are you all making of what they have actually gotten once they are able to sign up? Give it 2 years. You had 2 years to look at this.
Yeah, I think they expected more coverage for what they were going to purchase, and ultimately what's happened is that those of us who are at the bottom level of the federal poverty level would be most entitled or have the most available to them are actually buying plans that have the largest deductibles and the largest out-of-pocket. So consequently, it might as well be $1 million deductible because they can't afford the $6,000 deductible for the plan that they're getting for free.
Dr. Miller, I see you kind of nodding.
My patients have very severe financial constraints, and trying to afford the premium is a struggle. But any education effort that can go through so that people understand the difference between a premium and a deductible matters. I've had patients with high deductibles who have declined extremely important care. So I have a gentleman in his 50s who developed new double vision. When he looked in a particular direction, one eye pointed in another direction. That is an alarming finding. As his primary care provider, I recommended an ophthalmology consult as well as a brain MRI, and he declined both because it wasn't even feasible for him to pay the full price up until his $2,000 to $3,000 deductible.
So one thing I would add that's really important for people buying plans to understand is there are 4 tier levels of plans, from bronze to silver to gold to platinum. We don't really have any platinum plans in Missouri, but you can get a low deductible plan if you buy a gold plan. There are actually 0 deductible plans, but most people, about 60% of people are buying, or about 80% are either buying the silver plans or the bronze plans. In fact, I think this was the goal of Obamacare, like it or not. They wanted to give people a range of choices with a range of prices. I agree with both the previous speakers that it's important that people understand what they're doing when they make these choices, because they could end up in a $4,000 deductible plan with a low premium. So if you only base it just on premium, you might make the sort of wrong choice for you, and we're doing some research around that.
I think what we're realizing is that even though the uninsured rate seems to be going down, that isn't the whole story. You can have insurance and still not be able to pay a copay or be able to go see a specialist and afford that, and then afford the different kind of tests you might need or surgeries. That's the way our healthcare system works. And it also appears that within these plans we have relatively narrow networks. Now that insurance companies have to cover more people, they're finding ways to kind of cut back expenses by saying,
Work the system a little bit?
for lack of a better word, perhaps, basically, you might have a plan and only be able to get low-cost care at a set number of hospitals or primary care providers. And say you're in an emergency and you end up at a hospital that isn't in your plan, you'll be paying a higher bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, Casey, if I can interject, you know, and part of this is that people have a lack of understanding of, in our country, have a huge financial problem. They don't understand underwriting. They don't understand the pricing. So when you say, you know, they're trying to skirt the system, these actuaries have been given a task. The task is you have to fit the benefits within a certain guideline. So there's only so many ways that they now can accomplish that. And one of the ways is through the networks. So you have a choice. You can either have a plan that is completely off the charts unaffordable or not available because the actuary can't get to the number that the government is requiring, or you can have limited networks. And what this all means is that people have to get involved actively in their care. We don't have health insurance anymore. We have health financing, and there's a huge difference. So if you are buying a plan, and this is the main point, research that plan, make some good projections on what your needs are going to be. If you know that you have to have a procedure, then that patient should sign up for the plan with the least out-of-pocket that they can afford or that they can buy.
A couple things I'll add is it's important for people to remember that there are subsidies that are very significant for people. So I agree with Bill that if your income's pretty high, the prices could be pretty high for premiums, but if your income's right above the poverty line, you can get a premium for pretty low dollars per month. And and I think the other thing is we're playing out market forces in healthcare. This is what they wanted in Congress. They wanted to be able to offer a range of choices, and some plans are more generous than others. Some are more.
That's not what's happening, though.
I think it is actually, because
the market does not exist as you contend that it does right now in the health insurance field.
The health insurance markets actually work probably better than the rest of the healthcare markets. I mean, people have a choice of about 20, 25 different plans that range from just a couple $100 to $400 a month for a 40-year-old. So I think people can make choices, but they have to make educated choices. I totally agree with that. And I think one of the things they're doing is paying too much attention to the premiums. And I urge people to look at premiums, copays, deductibles, networks, and then that make an informed decision.
There is a silver lining to this cost awareness, and that is that doctors and patients have been blind to the cost of services until after the fact. And so as a society, we really need greater awareness of that, both the caretakers as well as the recipients. And so now I actually do have conversations with patients where, okay, you want me to get an MRI, but that costs this much, but it's actually cheaper over here, more expensive over here. But patients, I think they have a right to know what the costs are of their services in order to make an educated decision.
Okay, let's pause for 1 second because we do have a little bit of information when we get in from social media. We talk every week on Tuesday nights in our Twitter chat. Here's what you had to say this week about healthcare.
This week's Stay Tuned Twitter chat was all about what people think the ACA has done for our region so far. A couple of our chat participants shared how the ACA has helped them personally. One said, "I recently enrolled because I lost my other insurance. Incredibly easy, cheap drugs. I kept my doctor, very low premium, out of pocket." When we asked about what the lack of Medicaid expansion does to our region, Karen, who is a nurse, felt that it has made hospitals more fearful of less reimbursement dollars. We then asked what could be if Medicaid were to expand in Missouri. Nurse Karen thought it would allow more programs and allow hospitals better coverage. She thinks that the current state of healthcare coverage in the state is adequate for the insured, but lower income folks tend to be more sick and programs for prevention are key. Casey Hinton believes that it would help more rural hospitals and medical centers stay open, and few thought the Missouri legislature would expand Medicaid. Want to be a part of our next chat? Follow us on Twitter at StayTunedSTL and join the conversation on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. with the hashtag StayTunedSTL.
So, Dury, picking up just a little bit on some of the things in the Twitter chat there, are things different in the 2 different states that we are talking to right now? Is this conversation, does it look a lot different in Illinois than it does in Missouri?
Absolutely. Illinois expanded Medicaid. The legislature voted to expand Medicaid, that is. And so people who make less than 133% of the federal poverty level, I think that's about $15,000 a year, they qualify for Medicaid insurance, which is generally for people who are poor or disabled. Here in Missouri, the legislature has voted not to expand Medicaid about 3 years in a row. And when they did that, they declined a lot of federal money to cover people. And here, especially in Missouri, the qualification limit for people on Medicaid is very, very, very low. You have to be practically destitute to be qualifying for Medicaid if you're not a child or disabled. And so...
Let's not forget pregnant mothers, they're included.
Absolutely, but then they lose it 2 months after they give birth. And we're talking about people who are generally wage workers, who are the working poor, and they don't qualify for these subsidies when they go on to healthcare.gov. And so you'll see someone who is paying as much as someone who makes 400% of the federal poverty level.
So I think people refer to it as a gap. It was intended in the law, and jump in when you want here, but that certain people would be covered by Medicaid, and then the health care would come down and meet them in the middle. We didn't come up to meet that point.
So yeah, as Dury just pointed out, the Medicaid eligibility is for everybody below 133 or 138% of the poverty line. And then if states expanded, it was supposed to expand up to that level. And we didn't do the latter. So we have a gap between 19 and 100% of poverty where single mothers and children are not eligible. Single males and married couples are not eligible at all because they're not in eligibility category. So we've left out about 300,000 people that could get coverage in Missouri.
Let's talk about the other gap, though, that exists, and that is the middle class gap. Because I talk to people all the time who have to pay the full weight of the premium. And they are going without. They are evaluating the cost of the penalty versus the cost of the premium.
Which is only about $325. Well, I guess next year it will be about $695.
2% of income. 2%.
Whichever is higher.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is always, for the middle class, is always going to be the 2%. Right. And it's gross. It's not. It's not debt. So they're the ones who are paying they're the ones who are being burdened with these premiums that are going towards the working poor.
We've had this problem for decades, and it's just been getting worse. And so the increase in healthcare costs have been 5 to 10% per year until recently, actually, and healthcare premiums just keep going up. And it has squeezed the middle class, and that is part of what this is about, is to try to help people. And the uninsurance rate has dropped from 17 or 18% to 10% in 2 years. That's pretty remarkable, actually, to do that. We've added 15 million people to the insurance rolls in just between 2014 and 2016. That's pretty remarkable, actually.
We can't forget about the consequences of the gap, which is that if you don't have health insurance, it doesn't mean that we're not spending money on that population, but rather that they are seeking more expensive care. And so many of my patients are in that gap. Fortunately, if they live in St. Louis City or County, Gateway to Better Health will cover them, but that's due to expire in December. We're awaiting renewal. It's a fragile bridge to Medicaid expansion. I have patients, the patients who are in that gap, the vast majority of my patients, which represents the statistics in Missouri, work. And as an example, I have a patient who is a single mom going to school, and she has 3 conditions that we were able to keep under control: ADHD, asthma, and anxiety. And then she lost her insurance, she lost her income, had no way to pay for these medications that kept her incredibly functional, able to function as a mom, able to perform in the workplace. And I had another patient just this week, and this breaks my heart because this is a patient who actually has a very dedicated primary care provider. I hadn't seen her in a long time, and she reported her most recent visit to the emergency department for an issue that I could have taken care of in the office, and this broke my heart. I said, "Why didn't you call us? Why didn't you come in?" And she said, "I couldn't afford the $20 copay. You go to the ED, and you just get billed." And it is, so that's what we're paying for, but it's inefficient. And that, for that woman, she can barely afford the $2 bus fare.
So we're, believe it or not, we're coming to the almost to the end of our time here already tonight. So is it doing anything? Is it doing anything well? Is it surprised you in a positive way in any way?
Well, I think it's bringing it is bringing more people into the financial world so that they at least have some grasp of what insurance is. So I'm appreciative of that. But is it accomplishing what we want? All you've done is you've transferred one set of insureds to another. So you've taken the middle class, who are now going to bear the brunt of all this, and then you've taken the money they would spend on premium or that they're going to pay in taxes and given it to those who were the working poor that Tim describes.
Well,
So I see a positive change. So we have a net increase in the number of patients that are insured. I see patients that are a net effect of them being able to access services. And the system is working better. This is year 3. The first year, I had reports from our staff that it was taking hours to enroll patients. But now it is a more well-oiled machine than it has been before.
Well, yeah.
This is also just another option. It's that was kind of the purpose of the marketplace. It was to give people, even if they are middle class, even if they do have insurance through their employer, it's another option they can sign on and see if it works.
Well, it's not. It's not, because if you have other coverage, you are not eligible to receive any of the subsidies.
Well, that wasn't the point, of to cover people that already had other coverage. But I think that is, we have to keep our eye on the ball. What the point was, by this point, we were supposed to have insured about 10 million or so people in the marketplaces. We've done that. The increase in the Medicaid coverage overall is actually higher than what was expected. So we're halfway towards the goal of covering 30 million people. That's pretty significant.
Okay, Drury Buscarin, Tim McBride, Dr. Heidi Miller, and Bill Hill, thank you all for your time. This is a tough topic to tackle in 30 minutes. Thanks for taking it on in about 12. I appreciate it. Until next week, please stay tuned.